What's up, Coach TJ? We have taken a couple weeks off of the microcast to get ready for a pretty big race. Do you want to tell us what that was?
People know, they know.
What if they don't? What if there are people? I mean, we get enough listeners now that every episode there are a couple newbies tuning in.
Well, I love hearing that. So I guess if you're just tuning in,
Welcome.
welcome. We're so happy to have you. I just ran Western States.
How'd it go?
I finished.
You did. Yeah.
Yeah.
19 hours and 20 minutes.
23.
23 minutes.
23 minutes.
A new 100-mile PR.
A new world record.
A new world record. Not quite
Not quite.
Not quite a world record, but a TJ record, and that's important too.
Totally. Yeah, it was like a 2.5 hour, 100-mile PR.
Yeah, super exciting. And that is what we're going to be talking about for the majority of our time on this podcast, really diving into your day at Western States and what people, whether they want to race Western States specifically, 100 milers more generally, or really any ultra, what we can learn from your approach to this race.
Oh, man.
So even if you never want to run Western States, never want to race an ultra, this episode will be useful for you. But if you're a fan of Western States, of 100 milers, or just of Coach TJ, this will be a fun episode nonetheless. So I wanted to kick things off. We're going to celebrate 100 miles, we're going to do a mega hot or not to sort of walk through your day at Western States.
Okay, this will be a good warm-up for me because
Yeah.
I'm feeling a little shattered from the race.
Yeah,
to be
how
honest.
is your cognition?
It comes in waves. I think I'm at one of those like highs for the
Yeah,
day right
great.
now. So this could be good timing.
Well, we'll try to get you before you bonk. So hot or not, first topic I have is hot races. Hot or not?
Oof, that's such a tough hot or not. Am I supposed to go rapid fire here off the cuff?
No, I think we can, I think, again, my goal is for these to be educational.
I feel like hot races can be hot. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it was literally hot. But yeah, it was good. I don't mind them actually.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the most interesting, one of the more interesting things to look back on from states because it was definitely hot.
Yeah.
It felt hot.
It was
for
on the
me.
warmer side. It wasn't a historically hot year, but it was definitely quite warm, probably almost into the triple digits in the canyons.
Just to say, like, because of how like Western States works, like when we say historically hot, it almost feels like we're stigmatizing like all of the other years because
Not stigmatizing,
they
it's
are
just
still
like
legitimately hot.
it was a fast year. So like it's not, I'm not saying it wasn't a hot race. Again, like it was still like in the 90s for most of the day. That's quite warm. But it wasn't, 101 in Forest Hill.
Well, I think that the athletes who are competing at the higher end of the sport just are learning to deal with the heat a lot better.
Correct.
And are a lot fitter. And so, they're able to go faster when it's hot. Yes, it's hot. Yes, it feels hot to all of those guys, and women. But they're able to better deal with it. And so the times just keep getting faster and faster.
Yeah. And you used to not be a fan of racing in the heat. You've really come a long way and really specifically trained to be able to better compete in the heat. What have you done both in the long term to improve your performance in heat, to improve your self-talk in heat, and to get prepared for Western States specifically?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I wrote a little bit. I had a very brief race remarks on Strava, and I had mentioned in there like, man, I never really ever thought I would do this race or wanted to do this race, and one of the reasons was because it's so freaking hot. Here in Colorado, like, if it's this time, like in the preparation, the 8 weeks before this race, the weeks that like really matter, that are the most specific to training, when you're really putting it all out there, it's just not hot here.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, leading scientists in this area think athletes should do based on the research to prepare is to run in very hot temperatures because you want to get used to what it feels like. And so I really wasn't able to do that. Mm-hmm. There were some hot days, like when we went out to the course and did our boot camp. Those felt very hot. There was a few other moments in training where like it felt like things were getting warm, but I never did any runs in the 90s. I never did much more than maybe an hour or so at a time in temperatures that were even in the 80s. And I and I definitely felt intimidated by that, but like you said, like I've also worked over the years to like improve my relationship with hot races, and I think that's important. You know, like I played college tennis, and I remember having some really bad matches in very hot and humid conditions, and for a long time kind of like carrying that with me into my like running career,
Right.
and being like, man, I just don't perform well in the heat, and having kind of a story around that, based on some like past experiences in a totally different sport that uses totally different energy systems. But it's funny how that comes with you.
Right.
And I think, part of preparing for a hot race is dismantling any stories that you have that could be self-limiting. So, like a really specific part of my self-talk for this race was like, I'm great in the heat. My body is capable of handling the heat.
Right.
And just as simple as that. And there is actually research that backs this up, that your perspective in your self-talk around how you do in the heat can lower your RPE out there. So I practiced that a lot in training.
Yeah.
I did try to run in as warm of temperatures as I could, as I mentioned, but it was really limited. I think we had a cooler and wetter than normal summer here in Carbondale. I feel like when you did Western, you had some hotter conditions that you were able to practice in, and I was really hoping for that for myself. But I think it it is what it is, right? Like
Right.
you can't let that hold you back. So I really made sure to like do sauna and hot
Control
hot
the
bath,
controllables.
right? Did a 6-day protocol, which I think helped produce some good adaptations that led to keeping my core temp down. I also practiced a little bit with ice on one of my long runs to get used to like what it felt like running with ice, and I had a few different strategies ready for that. And I think using ice is really like the thing that I think makes this so manageable.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, so I don't want to bury the lead there.
Hot races can be great.
Yeah.
I think it's all about how you prepare for them. I think it's about your mindset and not making it a self-limiting story.
Correct. Yeah. I always, whenever I've asked, like, I don't know, I don't do well in the heat, that's always trainable. Like, unless you have like some sort of diagnosed condition, we are going to be able to help to optimize your specific physiology through training to get you to where you want to go for hot races. I love the heat. I'm from the South. I'm all about it.
Yeah, I think you're more naturally inclined. I'm a winter sports athlete. I have a former professional skier, over a 10-year long career in winter sports.
Yeah.
So it's, putting me in a hot place is something that, I had to really get used to over time.
Right. Well, speaking of skiing, this is a downhill race. You like to jokingly call yourself a downhill athlete. Hot or not, net downhill races.
Oh, again,
how are those quaddies feeling today?
I cannot get up and out of my seat without. I wish I had crutches right now. Honestly, like I wish I had a wheelchair at the airport yesterday.
Yeah, TJ was struggling at the airport.
It is just. Oh my God. I finally found the limit of what my quads could take.
Yeah.
I mean, I was still running, but it did not feel pretty, and I guarantee it did not look
It looked all right.
great.
I was behind you.
There was no knee drive for
the knee drive was limited.
many hours. I have noticed that a lot of the better ultra runners have very little knee drive, some of them as well. Maybe they've just adapted their stride to ultra running.
To the power shuffle.
They power shuffle very quickly. I was power shuffling it's just bad. It was bad what was happening out there. The net downhill is crazy. I'm gonna go not hot.
Oh,
I'm gonna go not hot on net downhill races, at least for me. I felt like this was going to be my huge strong point in the race.
Yeah.
And when I, went through my splits for the race and was, calculating how long it took me was going to take me from getting one place to another, I just totally overestimated how well I'd be able to run the downhills on this course, compared to, past race performances where I've done quite well on downhills. Yeah, I feel like there was a point in the race where I even came through a crew and I was talking to you and I was like, I feel not great in the downs, but those ups feel really good today.
Yeah.
So that might be indicative of some good movement in my overall training architecture, raising that floor over time. But boy, the downhills did not help me out at this race at all.
Yeah.
I was actually really disappointed with the downhilling. It's still in my head a little bit.
Is there anything you would do to train differently?
I don't know. I've been thinking about that a little bit today. I mean, you guys can check out, my Strava, and I feel like I had really balanced training between some faster, flatter miles to maintain turnover, and then some, obviously on the weekend running a lot of vert and doing a lot of like specific steep downhilling that I did feel was similar to what I saw in the canyons. And even during the race, I felt like I kept telling myself like, yeah, you're well trained for this part of the course. I don't know. Maybe it's just having not done that race before. I don't know if there's something different that I could do. Maybe if we hadn't had such a snowy end of the season, I would have done some runs up high in the Alpine and more technical Alpine running terrain. Cause I don't know, maybe there's like 15-ish miles of the course that are kind of like that and they're a bit slower, but, I don't know. We were so stacked up in the field anyways at that point. I didn't really know if like training would have helped that. I was kind of held back by people who were in front of me.
Yeah.
It's really
It's usually not where you win the race either.
No, but
yeah, to sort of zoom this out for our athletes, if you have a lot of downhill or vert, like vert of any kind, but usually when people talk about blowing up their quads or having legs that they just don't feel that they can continue to run for the whole race, a lot of times because you haven't correctly trained for the downhills. The best way to get better at downhills is to run them in your training.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're running a race with prolonged or technical downhills, you need to make sure you're practicing prolonged and technical downhills in your training to increase your eccentric muscle strength.
I mean, I hate to say it because it almost feels like inauthentic to me. Like maybe this is an expression of not feeling like I was enough or my training was enough. But I did days that had 7,000 feet
sometimes
of descent, and
stuff just doesn't fire on race day.
It still was, I still didn't feel sharp.
You can say, I think I did my best in training, and like not everything totally clicked on race day.
Yeah,
I
don't think
that's
I could have done more.
Yeah,
I think I really did try to respect. I definitely tried to respect the downhills. I had some pretty ridiculous a couple moments there where I was like, I went out of my way.
Yeah.
To like on really shitty weather days to make sure I did some pounding, crappy descents and but man, it's overrated. Like I definitely thought
it's not free speed.
Yeah, like it's not. Like I definitely thought that I would have had way better splits, especially that section after mile 30. See, my cognition's not that good. I can't remember that aid station. What's the aid
Robinson
station?
Flat.
Yeah, after Robinson Flat. I mean, it was
road.
Just such a gentle graded downhill. I just didn't I was surprised by that. I thought it would be steeper. I wish I had seen that like in the boot camp, but because of snow we couldn't. It just, I should have been running. I mean, I hate to say should have. I ran the paces that I could, ran the best I could. I wanted to run faster on those sections. Well, I don't think any amount of training would have changed that. I think it was just whatever happened on the day.
Yeah. And that is sometimes how it goes. But again, make sure that you're getting enough downhill in your training. And especially if you feel tentative on those downhills, really practice in key moments in your training, pushing that envelope to improve your ability to move downhill work on your core strength. Core stabilization is especially key for later in the race. If your core isn't strong, that's going to make your balance much, much harder. Work on your eccentric leg strength through things like backward stepping lunges and the mountain legs routine. And also just work on running prolonged descents in training, because the longer those descents get, the more important it is to maintain that focus and practicing fueling on longer descents too.
That's a mistake I see a lot of runners make, is they don't take the time to actually match up the terrain that they'll see on race day. And we've talked about this in the last podcast or the one before that, where we talked about the importance of race-specific training. But if you've got a race with those longer descents, you really want to be practicing them, because they're a lot different than shorter descents or rolling terrain. The quads respond to it differently. I thought that it was very interesting how after the first 60 miles or so of the race, I definitely was like, wow, my quads are like pretty banged up right now. Like they definitely feel really worked. Like I felt like at 60 miles at this race, I felt way worse than I felt like at 60 miles at Leadville last year. But my legs actually, I had some of my best downhilling on the section after Forest Hill through the Cal Street area. Those were my best downhills. Largely because like some of those sections actually were much steeper. So I think, something else that sometimes is missed is like, are these downhills steep? Or are they, 2-3% graded downhill, where you really like gravity's not going to work as much for you. So you need to practice kind of like picking up your pace and getting some more output into your stride. And I think that was maybe something that I missed in my training, where most of my training was very steep. So I felt extremely comfortable like on the early sections of Cal Street. But I think I overlooked some of those gentle graded downs maybe a little bit.
Yeah. Awesome. Hot or not, changing shoes during an ultra. Did you change shoes during Western States?
No, I didn't.
I know. Yeah, you just rocked what were they? The Adidas Terex Agravique Speed Ultra.
Yeah.
Adidas's carbon plated shoe.
Yeah.
How do you think about whether or not to change shoes during an ultra?
Again, oh man, it's going to be individualized, but for me, I'm like, what's most efficient?
Right.
So changing shoes to me is a waste of time.
Correct.
And I'm like, every minute counts.
Right.
So I didn't change shoes because of that. I will say on the downhill section after the aid station at mile 30, Robinson, thank you. You're going to have to help me with this all day. After Robinson, I did feel like I was getting a little bit of a blister on the bottom of my foot. So I, was like, stopping is going to be, I was finally building some momentum, and I was like trying to force myself to run faster because I felt I was going slow there. And not utilizing those downhills well. But I said, screw it. Like if you get a blister, it's going to be, it could be hours slower that you end up because of that. And it's going to affect your gait later. So I pulled over and I took 2 minutes. I did pull my shoe off, pulled my sock off. Both of my shoes were soaking wet. My socks were disgusting. But I took little Squirrel's nut butter, applied it to the bottom of my foot, put my sock back on, made sure that there was no like spots that were like overlapping or off.
Right.
It was a little frustrating because several people like passed me there, but I just said, hey, don't worry about that. Like you got to this whole day is about taking care of yourself. Like
playing the long game and figuring out, will 2 minutes now save me 2 hours down the road? And like sometimes it will. I think it sounds like in your case that was a good decision.
Well, it definitely
But also like I never want athletes rolling into every aid station ready to do like a full wardrobe change.
Yeah. And, I think taking a few minutes here and there is a really good idea. Obviously, like if you look at my stoppage time, I had like 40 minutes or so of stoppage time, and there was a few really, I think, key moments. This was one of them where I took extra time that probably, saved me from a day that was like maybe could have become like a bit of a, I don't know if we're supposed to say vision quest anymore. I don't know.
A journey.
A bit of Yeah, a journey with a negative
Yeah.
mental connotation.
Yeah.
I think, those stops really ended up keeping me in a good place because they helped me physically. I don't think it's really necessary, honestly, to change shoes in an ultra. My feet were wet the whole day. I
Yeah.
had practiced like that. I always lube up my feet, and that really helps. I think if you're not putting Body Glide on your feet, probably start doing that.
Yeah.
That really, really helps to prevent blisters, and then you don't have to waste time on that because there was way more important things that we needed to do at those aid stations.
Yeah, I would tell athletes not to change shoes unless absolutely necessary, right? Like, even in like a race like the JFK 50, some people, because it's like, this is a really specific race where you run from the Appalachian Trail and then you do like 12 miles on the more technical part of the Appalachian Trail and then like 38 miles on flat towpath. So a lot of people go from trail shoes into like Nike Next Percents or like Nike Alpha Flies because it becomes a road race. So there can be times, like last year at Leadville, you changed from the Tectonics into the Speed Goat, I think, like into a more technical shoe. So like
And
on
honestly,
the flatter sections of the course, you wore a faster shoe, and then on the steeper sections, you wore a more rugged, less speed oriented shoe. So I think sometimes that can be beneficial. But, for most of our athletes, you're going to be benefiting more from appropriate training, making sure that you're training appropriately in your gear, that you're testing things. If you're going to be like doing creek crossings and whatnot, make sure you test the sock and shoe combo you're wearing. Make sure you test your blister prevention systems. Make sure you're getting really good at foot care and just spending more time on feet, right? A lot of times if your feet are just blowing up in every ultra, that is just because you're simply not putting in the work required to run the distance you're trying to race.
Yeah, or you're just too new.
Yes.
It takes time to develop calluses in your feet and
it gets
that
better.
resilience. It does get
and
better.
Also
over
sometimes
time.
shit just happens too.
You never know how your feet are going to rub in there.
Yeah.
Honestly.
All right. Hot or not, ice bandanas.
Very hot.
Yeah, you're all about the ice right now.
Yeah.
Tell me why.
I mean, it made such a difference. Like it took what felt like probably pretty insufferable conditions for me, and made them, I don't want to say a non-issue, but
it helps you manage.
Yeah, I made
temps.
one critical mistake going into the middle canyon down to the bridge down there. I can't remember the name of it. Sorry. Deadwood. Thank you. See, you can do this for me the whole time. That descent down to Deadwood, I made an error at the aid station going into that, but had I not made that mistake, I don't think I would have really suffered from the heat at all, and that was because ice bandana and also ice in the pack.
Mm-hmm.
There was, I think, between Michigan Bluff and Forest Hill, which I think is a really underestimated section. It's not the most fun. I actually did.
Pretty hot.
Yeah, I did 2 ice bandanas there.
One in the front, one in the back.
Yeah, plus ice in the pack and cooled down arm sleeves that were in a bag with all the ice. And I mean, that just helped to make everything really manageable, and for me to feel like I could still run kind of like on my edge without spiking my heart rate. But I was reading back an article that that David Roche wrote in Trail Runner. He kind of gives like a 101 on how to run Western States, and kind of funny that he sent me that as my pre-Western States coaching preparation. He was just like, read this article. So okay, I did. And there was a section in there about how your heart rate could go up, 10, 20, even 30 beats per minute higher for your relative perceived effort because of how hot it is. So I was kind of concerned about that. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen here.
Is my heart gonna literally explode?
And then if it stays up for too long, it's a sign your core temperature is coming up, and then you're not going to be able to bring your heart rate back down, and then that's going to really override your aerobic system. Yeah. Your ability to keep running. So I was kind of watching that a little bit, and I noticed that the ice kept, although my heart rate was higher, I think for the output, it kept it to about like 10 beats per minute higher, which felt really manageable. So I was like never at lactate threshold during the race, but there were some times where I was definitely well above zone 2 and into zone 3. I wasn't like pushing into that like kind of no return zone that like maybe some other athletes can be in, but like I'm physically just like not able to be in that zone during a 100-miler.
Yeah, the Rod Farvard zone.
I mean, I'm really into this like application for athletes. Ice and ice bandanas is, I think it's just mandatory in any ultra, like honestly, maybe even 50K and above. Like if it's warm, why not throw an ice bandana on, put it on your chest, tuck it under your shirt so it stays kind of like flat against your skin, and use it to keep your core temp down. That's going to allow more blood to go back to your GI system so you can continue to eat and drink well. It's going to also make you feel better. So it's going to change your perspective on how you're doing in the heat, which is going to allow you to run better.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely something that, you know, we're going to probably see more regularly in ultras. Like, man, I wish I was just thinking so much about how it would have made a huge difference for me at Leadville last year.
Yeah. Well, last year was a historically hot year for Leadville.
And it makes such a makes such a difference. Even if it's not that hot, why wouldn't you want to keep your core temperature down?
Totally.
Why wouldn't you want to keep your RPE down?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, because it's like, well, what is your access to ice like? What is your access to crew like? How does that logistically interface with like your actual race?
Well, most races you can have crew, not all,
right? But like, not every athlete has crew at like all.
I would advocate that crew is hot in a hot or not situation,
right?
And so to have that support, have a little bag of ice out there, even if you can only use it once or twice in a race, that and soaking yourself at aid stations, I think that just makes a huge difference. I probably won't do a race ever again that doesn't incorporate that unless it's maybe in December.
Well, I'm just thinking at my last 2 races, I didn't have crew.
Right. And
there was no ice on the course.
Right.
So like logistically, how do we like, what's the rubber meets the road? Like, I just always want to make sure our coaching recommendations are grounded in most athletes' realities.
Most reality is you can have a crew. Most races
you can, but like not everyone
has
a crew everywhere. Anyway,
moving
on. Fueling with whole foods during an ultra.
It's not hot.
Yeah.
No, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time. You're gonna get nauseous. That's my experience. I ate a little bit of Whole Foods. I have no idea. Pop-Tarts, poppers.
How many and when?
3 packs, so 300 calories, maybe 300 milligrams of sodium. It's like basically nothing in a race where I took in like 11,000 calories or something ridiculous. It was very early in the race before it got hot. That was kind of my strategy. Like, eat some real food earlier in the race, and then see what happens later. When it got really hot, you know, like it's just like, you don't want to put that in your mouth. Like, I want stuff that goes down really, really fast and easy. So goo liquid, never second, liquid gels, and liquid calories. Like, I use those for, oh God, so many hours, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's so much more practical. I mean, like, if you're an athlete out there listening to this, figure out a way to make those things work for you. It will change your race experience.
Yes, but with the caveat that always try to work with an expert who can help individuate your nutrition. Whole Foods do have a place. Like, there is, you know, for particularly races that are 8+ hours, incorporating just a bit of fat and protein, not a bunch, just a bit, not exceeding 8 to 10 grams of protein per hour, which, like, that's on the extreme. Like, most people won't be doing 8 to 10 grams of protein per hour later in ultras, but having a few hours where you do get close to like 8-ish grams of protein can be helpful. Incorporating some whole foods later in ultras, even earlier, right? Making sure you have a strategy to where you're meeting your nutrition needs. You're not falling behind earlier in the hours of the race, making sure that you're ahead of your shit nutritionally, and then making sure that if like you have palate fatigue or, you know, later in the race, if your stomach goes, you have a robust nutrition plan that responds to that. So I advocate for making sure you work with an expert, and nutritional flexibility and practicing whatever you're going to be doing. But yes, looking for highly digestible, simple carbohydrate, usually in the form of sports nutrition, is going to be the most desirable way to get that.
And I think, in these races, you just need to go as long as you can on the stuff that's easiest as possible to get down. And then you fall back on your other stuff, which again, like we had some fallback plans.
We had mashed potatoes ready to go just in case.
Mashed potatoes, more of those poppers. Tried to do the Never Second chocolate bar late in the race because Kylie was like, try a little Whole Foods now that it's cooling off, and the ambient temp was just, I think, still pretty too hot, and I just didn't.
And also, it's really runnable, and you were running like 10, 11 minute pace, so I think it's pretty tough. Like,
it's so hard to
eat solid food in that circumstance.
Mashed potatoes could have maybe been a better option there because I made them like really smooth, so the texture would have been nice. And I was thinking about that earlier today. I was like, oh, if this was more of a UTMB where I would have probably been another 3-4 hours, I probably would have started to switch over to potatoes because like I was getting like a little bit tired of those goo liquids and the liquid calories. But again, honestly, like it's just gonna take a lot for me personally to shift away from the stuff that's most practical because I'm trying to finish as fast as possible. Right. So I'm doing everything that helps to facilitate that. But that's just me,
Right. Again, like ideally work with your coach, work with a registered dietitian nutritionist. I always, again, like it's so individual. So if you're one of my athletes, reach out. We can work on a fueling plan together. But yeah, I don't advocate for not doing Whole Foods.
Yeah.
And I also don't advocate for it has to be really, really individualized, and you have to take into account the athlete's fitness level and the environmental conditions they'll be racing in. Speaking of environmental conditions, hot or not, using the sauna to prepare for races.
I think if prescribed by a coach, it's hot, or if you really know what you're doing in terms of like how to incorporate that into your training, it's hot. If you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have help with that, it could really mess you up.
Yeah, you're going to be a baked potato.
It's a significant training stress. The most important thing for dealing with the heat is first and foremost fitness. Always be maximizing your training and the fitness that you build through that. That's your number one defense against the heat before anything else. The rest is extra, and they should be done separately, in my opinion.
Yeah. See our podcast / YouTube video about heat training for ultra runners. Is it worth it? Speaking of bucket hats, TJ, hot or not?
I think
you wore 3 different hats throughout Western States.
I wore two. Well,
walk me through your headwear strategy.
Yeah. I started with
because this is critical.
Super critical. No, I started with the trucker hat. The one and only Dream Big hat. I love that hat.
Prototype.
I'm not going to mass produce those. It's too heavy. I can't. Yeah, I got issues with it.
TJ's out here testing future Microcosm swag so that you don't have to.
I like starting out with like just a regular hat. No frills. And then when there's a lot more sun on the face, I do prefer to switch to the bucket hat just because I'm, pretty light skinned, and I just like mentally, I don't want to think that I'm getting sunburned in those canyons. You like really feel like your face is burning. Like the heat reflects up off the ground, and it's kind of a little bit like being on a glacier. That's like, I'm trying to like find something where I feel like I've felt that before, where like you're gonna get a sunburn like up your nose.
Yeah,
that's kind of like what a little bit it feels like to run in there. But it's more like all around. You're like in an oven. It feels like you're inside an oven. So I think the bucket hat helps. But there are also moments where like I could see how like Emily Hoggett, she's like, I don't wear a hat because like I've got enough hair and like it's already hot. There were moments where like I just took my hat off completely because like I did feel like it was keeping like heat from coming out. Mm-hmm. So the bucket hat is great to shield from the sun, but if you're getting hot, taking it off can be really helpful, and then just soaking like your actual head with cold water or putting some ice. Overall, though, I'm hot on the bucket hat because I like the extra protection from the sun.
I love that also for you. Another wardrobe thing, hot or not, changing shirts during an ultra. You did not change shirts during this race.
No,
I believe you did during Leadville.
I did during Leadville.
I think so.
I think it could be nice to have a frozen shirt in like a cooler.
Yeah. Well, not too frozen because you have to be able to put it on.
Right, not too frozen, but like cold. Like my arm sleeves I had an arm sleeves that were like that. And I think it could be refreshing, honestly. But again, like depends on you. I think it's more of a mental thing. For me, probably don't need to do it, so I'll go not hot on that.
I did notice Jim Walmsley was changing shirts quite a bit throughout the day. Katie Scheid changed shirts twice.
And I think for them, it's probably like a mental thing. You know, it probably helps them feel refreshed. So that way, like, I mean, they're just running so hard. It must just make them feel more comfortable for a little longer. I could see that being mentally helpful.
Yeah, love it. Racing with a handheld, hot or not? Handheld versus vest, how do you decide? What factors are you considering?
I mean, I'm hot on the handhelds in general, but I think for Western states, the pack is probably the better call. Most folks are drinking a couple flasks an hour in those conditions, and you can just hold more in that vest, so you have more contingency. When you go down to the handheld, it feels nice, but you better be darn sure like you've got everything that you need. I liked the vest, and usually in a race, like I use handhelds, like at Leadville, one flask in the back of the waist belt and one in the hand, and you're good to go. But at this race, I went with the vest because like you can put ice in the back of the vest. Yeah. And honestly, that probably helped keep me cooler. Yeah. So it felt more practical for like this exact application.
We also learned a great tip from our friend Jeff Colt to make little, we've been calling them ice burritos. TJ got pantyhose, and we would stuff little pieces of pantyhose with like a wad of ice. So you had like a little burrito made out of ice so that the ice doesn't disperse in the pack. And it's sort of, you have like a longer time to carry it between aid stations. Yeah. And that seemed to work really, really well.
Super good tip.
Yeah, if you're thinking about using ice at your next ultra, consider making an ice burrito out of pantyhose. Hot or not, pacers.
Super hot.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you look for in a pacer?
Oh, man. I look for somebody who's kind of got like a thick skin and who's flexible. Somebody who can like keep me entertained if I need it, and also be comfortable with me just saying, hey, you know, don't talk to me. Yeah. Like, which I had to do to both you and Sean.
To be fair, you didn't say don't talk, you said let me focus.
Yes, I said it in a nice way.
Yes.
But that's what I meant. I meant don't talk to me. You know, it was nice, like, when I left Forest Hill with Sean. He's such a positive guy, and he filled me in on, you know, everything going on with the crew and, you know, the fun stuff happening in front of me in the race and everything. And I felt that was nice. But we soon got into like a pretty fast downhill, and this guy from Leadville passed me, and I got pretty motivated to like push hard in that section. And, you know, you're 60 something miles into the race. You know, it takes quite a lot of mental energy to want to like to try to be running like 8-minute miles downhill. Like, it was hard. Mentally it was hard. So I remember telling Sean, like, okay, let me focus. Yeah. You know, enough jokes. I want to just run. And for a while, you know, I set the pace. He was able to run really well behind me. And then he went in front. He was also like super helpful at the aid stations, getting things filled up. A very cool, calm, and collected attitude, which I think is super important. Like, not, doesn't like kind of get out of his head, you know, if this doesn't let the situation get to him, like, can really handle himself. And I think I really look for that. And then, you know, we also kind of made a more or less a last minute decision to have you pace for 20 miles, which, you know, I had been thinking about it for most of the race actually, because I wasn't, in my heart, I wasn't having a good day. And I didn't want to express that to anyone but myself.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make the absolute most of...
You needed your emotional support dog.
It wasn't that I needed emotional support. It was I needed, you know, someone who wouldn't let me off the hook.
Someone who knows you well and also knows how to run hundreds.
You know, when you look for pacers, you want to have people on your team who have been in that arena before.
Yeah.
And who know what it's like to be in that arena and to not be at your best, but also know that you cannot be at your best and still be trying to do your best and hold you accountable to that. And I felt like you were the singular, after Sean, best match for that. And so that's why, you know, I thought, you know, have you in there because you've also been in that situation before many times. And so you know what it feels like and you know what it takes. And, you know, like if I'm going to stop to walk, you're going to, you know, not let me do it.
Yeah.
And that's what you need. You know, that's literally, that was the difference between, you know, probably a 22, 23 hour finish and the 19 hour and 23 minute finish was really having someone who's just their presence was like, you're not walking.
Yeah.
So, you know, I would recommend for any athlete, like when you're thinking about pacers, you know, not hire, bring people in, you know, who have been in the arena before, who know what it's like to pursue excellence. And, you know, it's not to say that there weren't other people on the crew capable of that, but I do think that, you know, only the closest maybe of people in my circle really can come in with the authenticity and the vulnerability to hold me accountable and not to people please me and to really like, you know, make me dig, help me dig.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm never too worried about pleasing you.
No, you're not usually, which is why, you know, we kind of switched it up on the fly and had you pace the last 20, and I felt like that made a huge difference.
What guidance would you give athletes who are thinking about conscripting pacers for their next adventure?
Well, beyond what I just mentioned, I think I think I just mentioned it all. What do you mean?
Well, like my advice would be make sure you communicate with your pacers. Pick people who you know well, who are going to be down to run with you on your best day and also your worst day, because you never know what it's going to be. Pick people who you trust unconditionally and who you can be yourself around. And then do not be afraid to boss them up. You just can't be afraid to be like, here's what I want out of today. Here's how we're going to get there together. Here's how to treat me if I'm having a good day and you can push me. Here's how to treat me if I'm having a tough day. And here's how to push me. And just like really make sure you discuss with them all like sort of outcomes and possibilities. And that just means it needs to be people that you're not like just you're not worried about protecting. And I think we're really grateful because we have a ton of people like that in our lives who are athletes themselves who won't take it personally if you tell them to just shut up and run. And I think that that's really like, you know, historically I've sort of been really intentional about like, okay, well, like I would love to have Sean pace me for this section of this race because he'll know how to push me and he's really great in this terrain. And then I'll have my friend Jordan pace me here because he's really fun and lighthearted and it's just like a huge like stoke monger.
Right.
And then I'll have like Kylie or TJ pace me here because they're hard asses and they know how to push me and they won't be offended if I just need to like be quiet or listen to music or something.
Yeah. No, I think that you kind of gave a good, you painted a good picture of, I think, of the qualities of a pacer, and what to look for. It's tough. I feel like, you know, there were some things maybe that I wanted to do better there, but it's still a learning process. And pacers, you know, need to be involved in that too.
Yeah. So now I just wanted to do a little race debrief with you. So now that we're a couple days out of the Western States Endurance Run, I wanted to do something that I like to do with my athletes when we do a race debrief, which is a start, stop, continue. What do you want to start do? Like when you think about what you've learned from this race, what do you want to start doing in your life or training? What do you want to stop doing in your life or training? Because we can't always add things on. We just watched the first episode of season 3 of The Bear last night, and there was an amazing section where Carmi learns that the best way to progress is to subtract, and I agree with that so much. You can't just continually add things in and add things in and add things in. To get better at things, you also have to learn how to ruthlessly subtract, how to ruthlessly take away.
Yeah.
So I always want athletes to think about what they're going to stop doing, what they're going to remove from their lives or training, and then what are you going to continue doing? Let's validate what's working well. Let's really think deeply about what is working and how we're going to continue with it. So
Okay. All right.
what's your start, stop, continue? Also, and I really wanted us to go through this framework because it's something that I use with athletes. I think a lot of times I see people write race recaps and it's really hard to understand what they learned from their race because it's just like a play-by-play. And that's not actually always that useful when it comes to processing like what happened out there and what does that actually mean for our progress going forward. It's not like I don't want us to think about what happened. I do, but we need to be thinking like, okay, this happened, so what? And I think the start, stop, continue is a helpful framework because we can think about what we need to do better, we can think about what we need to stop doing, and we can validate what we've been doing well. So
Yeah, I'll try to keep it concise but to be fair, I don't know if I've fully digested and integrated the entire experience. I will say, this is tough. Okay, what do you want me to start with?
start.
So what am I going to start doing that I feel like the race has shown me I need to start doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And like sometimes I'll have athletes that are like, I don't think I need to start anything else, and that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to be lame and I'm going to say I don't know what I need to start yet. I do feel like there was something that this race forced me to start that I did start in the maybe 6 weeks or so before the race that I definitely think helped. And that was I stopped working on Sundays.
Yeah.
And I felt like that is something I hate to hit the continue button on that, but I'm going to because
Continue taking a 2-day weekend.
Yeah, because man, I started recovering so much better from my training. And started feeling mentally better. And I think I remember remarking to you that going into this race, I'm like, man, this is like the least stressed I've felt. Even though there was stress, there was definitely stress, and I had my back flared up as a result. But like overall, this was way less stress than I felt going into Leadville, and so much less stress than going into CC the year before that. And I didn't have an allergy flare up before this race, which was huge. So I'm going to continue to take the rest that I need to train, to be the coach, the business owner, all of that. So that was something I started that because of the race. I knew the race was asking me for that because my training was a lot. And so I'm going to hit the continue button on that.
Love it.
Yeah.
Can I give you my suggested start?
Sure. Yeah. What did you see?
Racing more Western States qualifiers.
Ooh,
I think that looking at how well you were running later in the race and how much fun you had out there and sort of walking away being like, wow, that was a pretty good day, but it wasn't my best day. If it was me, my start would be get more qualifiers and think and build a long-term plan about how to get back if it means something to you. We're only a couple days out, so I'm just going to like leave that offering on the table as a start.
Yeah.
I think it would be if you were like, as soon as you like woke up the next day or like, let's sign up for a qualifier, I'd be like, yo, let's like digest, let's process, let's talk about this. But I like seeing that fire lit in you. So like as a coach, my advice would be like, let's start taking that seriously.
I like that. And that kind of plays into another continue thing that I can just say for sure right now. Like I said on this podcast that I wanted to go for like a 16-hour, 30-minute race. I absolutely feel like I'm capable of that race as an athlete. I did not have that race.
Yeah.
I wasn't even close to that. I still think right now, as I am fully capable of running that race. I didn't think I had a very good day, and I'm going to continue to set high goals for myself and continue to go for it at every race that I possibly can. I'm not going to race with reckless abandon, but I'm going to continue to, express that like enoughness that I can set those big goals and go for it, that I have the body of work and the experience that supports that. And just because like I didn't achieve like the bigger goals that I was going for at this race, like I'm still going to pursue those things.
I love it. What are you going to stop doing? What like didn't work, or what's something you're like, I just don't know this is worth it? What are you going to ruthlessly take away from life?
What am I going to take away?
Yeah.
Again, like I don't think that there was anything.
I mean, work, like stop working on the weekends.
But I did the race. Mm-hmm. I think a great goal, like a really big goal, one that's a stretch for you, like Western States. This was a major step up. This is my second ever 100. And it was a major step up from Leadville. This is a more difficult race than the Leadville 100 in many ways. They are also very different races. I will say that. But I felt this was a more difficult race, much more pressure, much bigger field, like a confluence of many different things. And as a result of that, it forced me to continue to look at like my enoughness as a coach. Like, do I have to work on Sunday to feel like I'm enough? Like, that's me proving, me trying to, that's not authentic to me. Like, what are the habits that I've developed that come from that place of not enoughness? Mm-hmm. Those are the things that I need to continue to suss out, root out, and stop so that I can fully express myself as an athlete, a coach, a business owner from that place of abundance, and really then figure out who I'm supposed to be, what my potential is, what I'm capable of, because you can't get it when you're coming from a place of proving,
right,
a place of scarcity. So, I don't know exactly what's in there. I have a sense that I should have run faster. I hate using should statements.
At the 100-mile distance,
It's just earlier in the race, I'm just going to say, we talked about this for Lake Sonoma. I have a sense that I held myself back at the beginning of that race. I feel I held myself back at the beginning of this race, but it's so hard to say if that I got the time that I got because I was smart at the beginning of the race and didn't overdo it.
Right. Or
if I protected myself and maybe even subconsciously was protecting myself because, I had nerves.
Yeah.
I was really worried about the net downhill, how my quads would take that 22,000 feet of descending. Never done that before. That's definitely something new. The whole idea of being in that heat sustained for that long.
Yeah.
So what would that be like? So, I think that there's some stuff in there, but I want to continue at least to work from a place of starting these races more aggressive and staying on that edge of curiosity, something that like a continued thing for me that I think was really working is always developing those standards. What's my focus? What's my attitude? What's my effort level for this race? What are the actions that I'm going to take in support of the outcome I want to achieve? What are the supportive thoughts that I have? And really making sure that they are in alignment with that specific outcome and who I want to be as an athlete, and continuing to focus on that, I think, is the route to racing from that more abundant place. And I definitely felt that working for me during the race, especially in those moments where I could call on my curiosity.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can continue to run this way. I don't know, I was running so fast with Sean.
Yeah.
From mile 62 to the river.
Yeah.
Like we really were running well.
Yeah.
And it felt like some of my best miles of the race. And I didn't know, can I keep this going?
Yeah.
And at that point, Sean was like, if you keep this going, you're going to have an 18-hour finish.
Yeah.
And I stayed curious as long as I could. I did not achieve the 18-hour finish, but I tried as hard as I could.
Yeah.
And I stayed on that standard of, edge of discomfort for effort. Like even if my pace is falling off, how hard can I still maintain?
Right.
And so, for me, another continue. I feel like I'm doing a lot of things right. I don't know exactly what I need to let go of, the stop.
We can keep coming back to that.
Right. And I think that that's part of the process. But it's also, you can do so many things right and still not have your breakthrough.
Right.
And it will come. I choose to believe that it will come. Like I'm still new to hundreds. And I think it might take more experience.
Yeah.
And so like, I'm just going to keep pursuing that.
I love that. What's a big continue for you? What's something you're like, I'm definitely going to keep doing this. This worked really well. Icing.
Ooh, ice. I love the ice. I'm telling you, like, we're going to be icing you up at Leadville this year.
Can't wait.
Because I think that was a big mistake not to have it at my race. Even if it's just 70 degrees, I think a little ice on the chest, a little ice in the back of the pack, like lower the RPE. Why not make it feel easier? That's just going to make you run faster. The amount of ice, like I heard some of the other athletes were stacking on themselves. I mean, they must practice with that. You're adding pounds, but it's wild how well that it works. I'm definitely going to continue doing that. I'm going to continue running a lot more uphills. This race surprised the hell out of me. I ran so much of the uphill.
Yeah, I was really pumped when we were coming out of Rucky Chucky. You power hiked for like 10 seconds, got your game face on, kind of like, all right, new pacer, who this? And you started like charging up to Green Gate. I was so pumped because like we had, sort of talked about how you wanted to approach that climb on race day and you were unsure if you wanted to run it or to walk it because we had sort of seen it before in training and we knew it was significant. But you made the decision to run it and that was really cool.
Even so much of the run to Pointed Rocks, I ran as literally as much of that as I could.
Yeah.
In the run to Roby Point, the climb to Roby Point, I ran a lot of that.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, because we had Harvey Lewis on our tail. Always puts a little pressure on when you have like an ultra running legend, just like a little bit behind you. Shout out to Harvey.
I didn't know he was back there.
Yeah. Well, I knew, but I didn't want to say anything. I didn't think it was going to be helpful to say, hey, that headlamp behind you is Harvey Lewis.
Well, I just didn't care what position I was in.
It was all about like, how well can you run this hill?
Right.
And sometimes people can run better when they're motivated by competition. Sometimes they get in their head. So like, that's why it's so important to know what motivates you specifically and to coach your pacer up on how to talk to you in those tough moments.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. It was a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of like to be continued for me on this race.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. Like it forced me to really get into some habits that quite honestly are hard for me. It made me feel very vulnerable. Like I'm not doing enough, especially as a coach. Just quite honestly, man, it's just so hard in a business, where you're dealing with so many individuals and clients and not always, I'm fortunate to work with so many great people, but it's not always like that. It hasn't always been like that. And I'll be honest with anyone who wants to talk to me about it. It's hard. And sometimes the hard stuff makes you adapt in ways that don't really serve the outcomes you want, develop habits that aren't helpful. And I'm working on undoing those things, so I can really, be the coach that I want to be. And this race forced me to make a lot of changes, as any good goal does. I love the power of a good goal. I'm just going to keep hitting that to be continued, keep it going button and see where it takes me.
I love that. So what about training for and racing this race? Is there anything that has changed how you might approach racing or 100 milers or racing Western States specifically with athletes in the future?
Ooh, I'm not sure for myself, as you know, we talked about, but I think for my, any athletes that I coach, and I already have coached many athletes who have finished Western and some really great highlights over the last couple years. I just have so much more respect for those athletes. Like, you never know until you've actually done it yourself. People put up some really amazing times and like on this course, and God, like, you don't really realize just like how good they are, because it's this race is difficult. Like, the terrain is hard. I would probably have athletes focus a little bit more on technical running than I have in the past. And I think the boot camp weekend is definitely like mandatory. Like, if you're a serious athlete, you get into Western. Like, if you seriously want to finish,
I think if you're serious enough to run Western, do the boot camp.
You've got to find a way to get to see the course.
Yeah.
If it's that Memorial Day weekend event, which is just so much fun, or if you do a separate trip, we've done both. Get out there on the course, because knowing the course, it sets you up. And like, I knew the course, and then I designed my training to be harder than it, and it made the hard parts of the course, it made it more tolerable.
Yeah.
And I ran those sections, I think, better than I did at the boot camp, or at least I felt better about them in the moment, and that's what really matters.
Yeah, it is such a specific race. It's got really peculiar dynamics. It's a really fun puzzle. I personally hope I get to go back and try to solve that again in the future.
Well, I will say, sorry to interrupt you, but I will say that one of the things that I think really helps with Western States is having a long runway to prepare.
Yes.
I know, like, you're gonna have basically from the lottery date, and what is that, December or early January to the end of June to prepare. Don't freaking wait one day longer than when you find out that you're into that race to prepare,
and also just always be training. Yeah, I mean, doesn't mean you're always preparing for Western. I actually, every day I wake up and I'm like, whatever I do today brings me a couple steps closer to Western States or whatever my next big goal is. And I think that having that, I mean, that might be not the approach for everyone, but, and even for Leadville, like, I never knew when I was getting in via the lottery, but you bet, like, even the years where I didn't get in, or I wasn't gonna get in, or I didn't even apply, that doesn't mean all winter long I'm, like, just hanging out, chilling, and skiing. I'm still training intentionally.
Anyone who listens to this podcast for the last couple years knows our perspective on consistency, and I don't feel we need to get into it. But I think that the sooner you start working specifically towards that goal with the coach, I have this vision of what a great build up to Western States looks like, because I've now participated in it, and I've also coached athletes in it, multiple athletes. And it starts at the foundation of building speed.
Yeah.
And it works up from there. And I think where I saw athletes on the course struggling is they did not have good turnover. They didn't have good fundamentals. Maybe they didn't have that long runway of really building that foundation to then put the specific training on top of, because, like, I know that I did well at this race because I had both.
Yeah.
And yes, sure, I've been working with a coach for like 6-7 years. We've worked so much on this stuff over the years. It makes a huge difference. Like you said, I couldn't agree more. But even if you're an athlete who hasn't had the benefit of that, get with a good coach who knows what they're doing. It doesn't have to be us, someone you match well with. Get with them and start that process early so you have that foundation, because this race really rewards good runners.
Yes. As do many hundreds.
Yeah, of course, but like, you can't hike your way to a fast finish at this race.
No. If you're hiking, I mean, same with Leadville, right? Like, if you do need to be ready to run.
And there are a lot of hundreds that are, similar in that way. But there's not a lot that I've seen that have such a dynamic first 62 miles.
Yeah.
And then say, if you can't run, it's going to take you 10 hours to finish from here. Good luck.
Yeah.
And it made such a difference that, like, that I was able to just to keep running the whole time.
Yeah. Oh, such a fun adventure. I loved getting to share the last 22 miles on the course with you. That was really, really fun and special for me.
Yeah.
Running past the point where I DNF'd. We had to make some pivots at the last minute. There was a fire near the course, so the crew had to be flexible, and everyone was so stoked to support you on your good day. In our last minute here, what else would you like to add, or do you wish that I had asked you about Western States?
I just think it's everything that people who have done it say that it is.
Yeah, it's worth the hype.
Yeah, not
100%.
like every race you do matches up with the expectations that the culture kind of like sets around it. And Western States is really one of those races. I personally never raced a race where the volunteers at the aid stations are so dialed. I only encountered one volunteer who kind of messed up my flow a little bit, and I think it was maybe because I didn't communicate well enough in that moment. Like everybody was so supportive at those aid stations, like checking in with you, making sure like you just, I don't know, I wish every race could be like that.
Yeah.
And yet it's still like when you're out on that course maintains kind of like a mom and pop kind of feel because of
to me it's the most ideal ultra because of that.
Yeah, like and that's just because like those aid stations and the volunteers are just so like core to the sport. Like they're so into it. Some guy was like, I've volunteered for 26 years at this race, like at this aid station, like, and it was just like, wow, that is like amazing. Like, oh my God. So, thanks to all those guys for really making the race what it is. I was really overwhelmed by the hype of the start area, especially the day before the race. I didn't really feel comfortable there. I felt like it was just like way too much. Oh, this is turning into like, this feels like it did at CCC. And then, once I actually started the race, like a lot of that kind of went away and everything kind of like felt like the proper kind of like size and everything. It felt really motivating and helpful. And I think that, it's a course for me that doesn't really like you're never really going anywhere. Like the only place you really are going is that track at the end.
Yeah.
And so again, like what really made it special is that like each aid station you're either going to see your crew, and so like having a great crew that like is a good group of people that like want to spend time together and honestly just like isn't taking it like overly serious, like is dialed in but also having fun. Like, guys, this is running after all. Like, this isn't life. This isn't, the stakes aren't that high. I know like it gets confusing when you see such great athletes out there crushing it. But it's still just running. It's still, a small sport in a sea of other much more professionalized sporting, groups and different disciplines out there. But I think what made it special is again those different aid stations, and I came to like kind of like look forward to that in a race where there's really no destinations.
Yeah,
like you don't get to the top of a peak. You don't like get
after the escarpment, it's all downhill.
You don't get to a vista. Like you don't enjoy some things like seeing the sunset. Like it was like a trickle through the trees of orange and yellow. Like you start to appreciate the smaller things and they become bigger. And that's really cool and unique about this, and something that I think is special. Like each aid station, again, I think they really they work so hard to kind of create that. And then having the right people around you that you look forward to seeing and that are going to be fun and help you stay on the track that you want to be on, and everything is what makes this race special. Because man, I'm still gonna go back to what I said after the boot camp.
Yeah,
just I didn't think the course was really that special. I think it's what makes it's all of the ingredients together that make
I would
it
agree
special.
with that. Yeah. Well, so special to share it with you, and can't wait to share the story with our athletes. As always, hit us up if you are looking for coaching, microcosmcoaching@gmail.com, or if you just have comments, feedback on the podcast, or if there's a specific topic you'd like us to dive into, we're always happy to answer listener questions. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thanks, everybody.